They said escape was impossible, not because the walls were thick, not because the guards were smart and strong, but because of what surrounded it. Cold water, big waves, a bay that had swallowed people before and never let them go. Alcatraz, a power in the middle of San Francisco Bay, a federal prison built on rock. It housed men other prisons couldn't control, the dangerous, the hopeless, those who had already tried to escape. Frank Morris arrived in 1960. He was quiet. He was intelligent. Despite having spent most of his life in institutions, he had a far above average IQ. He knew how the systems worked. He knew how to monitor without being monitored. He also knew that Alcatraz had a weak point. The cells in blocks B and C had been built decades earlier. The concrete around some of the utility corridors was aged. It was slightly softened near damp spots. Not enough for anyone to notice, unless someone looked very, very carefully. Morris was looking. He found two brothers in the same block, John and Clarence Anglin. They came from a large family. They thought alike. Morris approached them, slowly, carefully, knowing that one wrong word could end everything. They agreed. And then they waited, because patience was the first requirement. The work began at night, after the lights went out, after the guards had finished their patrols. In the silence between checks, they dug. Small tools, taken from the workshop, from the food, from places no one thought to look. They worked on the weakened concrete around the plumbing behind their cells. At night, every morning they concealed their progress. Paint, cardboard. While working on the wall, they worked on something else. They collected raincoats, standard rubber-coated fabric. They were sewing them, carefully. In the auxiliary hallway above their cells, in the space above the suspended ceiling they had accessed early in the process. They were building something that could float. They also made faces, paper, paint. Real hair collected from the floor of the prison barber shop. In the dim light, they made heads that, when placed under a blanket, looked like sleeping men from a distance. They weren't perfect. They didn't need to be perfect. They just needed to last until the morning count. The 11th of June, 1962. The guards were on their night patrol. They saw 4 sleeping men. They went on. Morris and the Anglin brothers were already gone. They went on. Morris and the Anglin brothers were already gone. Up the back of the block, through a ventilation opening at the top of the structure, onto the roof of the prison building. The night was cold. The bay was shrouded in fog. San Francisco was not visible on the other side of the water. They passed smoothly across the roof. They went down the outer wall. They made their way to the water's edge in the darkness. They lowered what they had built into the water. They disappeared into the fog. In the morning, the guards found the beds. They found the faces. There were 3 empty cells, and they found a 4th cell belonging to a man named Allen West. West hadn't finished opening his own cell in time. He had been left behind. He told the investigators everything. The search began. Pieces of cloth were found on the nearby shore. A makeshift oar, personal belongings in a bag washed ashore. But there was no body, no escapees. Nothing was confirmed. The FBI investigated for 17 years before formally closing the case. They concluded that the 3 men had likely drowned. The currents were strong that night. The water was cold. The chances of survival were low. But proof of death was never found. Some believe they survived. There were reports of sightings over the years. Much later, a photograph surfaced, carefully analyzed and claimed by some to show the brothers as elderly in South America. The FBI examined it. They said it wasn't conclusive. One thing is certain. 3 men entered America's most secure facility. They didn't rush. They didn't panic. Worked quietly for months, and then disappeared into the dark waters of San Francisco Bay. Whether they survived is unknown. But the answer to the question of whether escape was impossible is already clear.